Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. And good morning to committee members. I'm an economist, a chartered accountant, and a businessman. I take it that my submission has been read. This is a supplement to that in the light of subsequent events. My career spans two phases. The first is some 32 years with a Shell group of companies around New Zealand, the UK, Southeast Asia, and the Philippines. When I retired from Shell, I came back to New Zealand and have had a number of directorships in private companies, listed companies, two listed companies, an SOE, which I'll return to. I've been involved in a local authority audit committee. I've been chairman of Hei Huarahi Tamariki, Araporo, of that trust. And the experience I've had over some 40 years informs this presentation and my submission, complements it. After in anticipation of retirement, I actually went to the University of Sydney and obtained a PhD in business finance. Now, since delivering my submission, the government has announced New Zealand is now open for business, for growth, and for overseas investment and finance. And that is after slipping to 33rd out of 37 in the Economist's country ranking last year. So my submission in support of this bill, and most importantly, in the general policy statement supporting the bill, which is its preamble, is therefore an added dimension. It is the chance to eliminate sovereign risk arising from our legislation or mitigating it. My submission, I refer to in paragraph 4, some of the considerations that people try to mitigate sovereign risk, as well as conditions that are applicable. And I think that the importance of sovereign risk is actually a very important issue and should not be underestimated. I could elaborate, if you wish, on 3 areas of my personal experience where sovereign risk has been an issue. The first was in the Maori joint venture agreements, where the Crown changed its opinion on a certain matter, and I can explain what happened, but that was a clear breach of the Maori agreements. The second one was the breakup of the Malaysia Federation, when Mahathir unilaterally declared his Bumiputra policy, and which basically denied access to business for Indians and Peranakan Chinese, and that caused the breakup, partly caused the breakup of the Federation, and Singapore and Brunei left the Federation. After the Marcos era, I was invited to go to the Philippines to try and bring back international financing agencies, banks, in support of our refinery project, which was some $665 million US. And that involved nearly 5 years of negotiation, to give you some element of why this sovereign risk is a really important issue. It involved bringing back a consortia of 6 different banking arrangements, involvement with UK law, with US law, with Filipino law, and considering in paragraph 4 the arbitration opportunities that presented in Malaya, in London, in New York, and in Australia. So that's where I'm coming from. On my return here, I was invited virtually immediately to join the SOE development group. Now, that was where a group of us were invited to present in 3 months a business plan and project to take over some of ECNZ's assets that they no longer wanted. And in the 3 months, we produced a business plan and a viable basis to form what became Contact Energy. I was an inaugural director. The government agreed, and we therefore were in business. Just the 4 directors. The only time in my career there's only been 4 employees in the company. And we set about going to Wairaki. We sat down, invited and sat down with a Whāratoa iwi advisory representative and asked them what were the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, which we regarded as part of our license to operate, social license to operate in using some of their assets, namely the geothermal field and everything related to it. His reply was, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name, we were recommended to act in good faith, responsibly, and to consult, subject to commercial considerations, about our operations and plans for the Wairaki geothermal field and the elderly Wairaki station. From my experience, therefore, this bill is timely, it's relevant, and it's important, with the added opportunity to help ameliorate sovereign risk relating to the underlying principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, which can affect New Zealand as a potential investment destination. In summary, therefore, I am in support of the bill and its policy statement to remove uncertain sovereign risk criteria.
Did he die?
From
what happened? Oh, there
potential investment. The referendum, if approved, would provide additional legislative certainty for investors, for citizens of New Zealand, and the business community. Per my submission, I think the bill needs further elaboration in the interpretations clause 4. And finally, I urge the committee to ensure clarity on amendments ready for legislative consideration as its prerogative and duty and responsibility. Now, I've got 2 other brief comments, if I may, Mr. Chair. In investigating the history of the treaty in the last few days, I draw the committee's attention to 2 essays by Sir David Barrett-Whitehoff in the February 2024 New Zealand Law Journal on these matters. Like Sir Apirana Ngata, which I refer to, and I've got copies of Sir Apirana's Treaty of Waitangi, if you wish, he is probably New Zealand's leading jurist and legal mind. His essays opine, for example, there are 4 parties to the treaty, not 2. Now that will surprise you. And he gives his reasons. Moreover, he says the preamble to the treaty, rather like the preamble to this bill, is an integral part of the treaty, but it is rarely referenced. And I suggest one looks very closely at the preamble to this bill. And what he says, it should be integral to the treaty articles in accord with Article 31 of the General Rule of Interpretation in the Vienna Convention of the Law of Treaties, to which New Zealand is a signatory. I've read the submission to you. I note that for legal reasons, I have read his submission to you. I note that for legal reasons, he does not support the bill as presented. So I just want to give you that counterbalance. I also commend to you the anthology attached to Dr. Bryce Wilkinson's submission to you. He details relevant reference material, which includes Sir Apirana's explanatory document, as well as Sir David's 2 essays, and various other correspondence. And they're not going to be necessarily covered elsewhere, and I suggest you do read that anthology. I think it's quite important. Thank you for your time.
And thank you, John. We've probably got time for 1 question from Tim. Sorry, with Kristen, so it'll have to be a very brief question.
So 7 out of 13 of your paragraphs in your commentary on your submission are about Tāpirana Ngata. You said he's one of the greatest, you said he's Māoridom's greatest leaders. Which other Māori leaders have you researched to inform your view on this
bill? Well, I haven't researched, but Sir Peter Buck, Sir Maori,
any contemporary ones?
Sorry, that's enough time for this one. Sorry, John, we're out of time, so that's the 10 minutes concluded.
Holy cow. Tabitha wants to debate with everyone, and I'm all for it. Yeah, so he said he worked in Southeast Asia, and he's an economist and an accountant, and he worked with Shell. He would probably be very intimately aware of the lack of rights that Indigenous people have in places like Malaysia. In fact, I've just put in the chat a paper that everyone can read. It is quite an eye-opener. The rights of Indigenous peoples in Southeast Asia, recent advances and current challenges. They don't have any advantages. They have a lot of current challenges. So I kind of screwed that up. But yes, so in Malaysia, they don't have a treaty like we do. The Indigenous people there don't really have a way to hold corporations accountable. They don't have a way to hold the government accountable. The government can essentially just bowl in there and go, right, this belongs to corporations now. So, yeah, it's just, and he's saying, sovereignty of Māori, that's a problem. Yeah, of course it's a problem. Duh. We don't want you mining shit. Not without our consent. That's where the concept of partnership comes in. That's democracy.
Actually, I've just grabbed a quote from J.R.R. Tolkien.
Oh, yeah.
You must understand, young hobbit, it takes a long time to say anything in Old Entish, and we never say anything unless it is worth taking a long time to say. And a lot of this inconvenience that we're experiencing is the drive here, because it's inconvenient to meet with the peoples, engage with it's inconvenient to engage in a fair and socially acceptable way.
Yeah. I wish I knew more about what's happening in Southeast Asia, but I do know this much. Indigenous people are poor, and they get screwed over by their governments quite frequently. In places, if you look at places like
I forget
Timor, Malaysia, in particular.
Yeah, you put a link there. I'll grab that open because there was a 2008 film mockumentary called The Age of Stupid, and I forget which, if it was Ethiopia or somewhere, Shell came in, they grabbed a bunch of oil and they said, we will use the natural gas to power your infrastructure, and the profits will go into schools and such. So, that as they're talking about this, they're walking through an abandoned school, because the problem was then their government gets all the funds and it's too corrupt or too unsafe to actually build the infrastructure that they're promised, and then they burn off all the natural gas anyway, because it's cheaper to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I've got the paper open. I just highlighted a quote here. Implementation of land rights. Today across the globe, Indigenous land rights and other associated basic human rights are mainly threatened by extractive industry. So that's your gas, oil, and mineral. Other industries and businesses also have enormous negative impacts on Indigenous peoples, right? That's a quote in the paper, and people can read that. That's public for everyone to read. And I want to know, with him working with Shell, how much profit his company made at the cost of Indigenous people and their land rights. I probably will never get the answer for that because he doesn't want to answer it. And also I can't ask him directly because I'm not a wizard. Links didn't work for me. Okay.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, News Guide, the Order Paper Podcast. YouTube, Twitch, Instagram.